On a brisk autumn afternoon, the sun was beginning its descent, casting a golden hue over the bustling streets of downtown Chicago. Among the people moving with purpose, business people, shoppers, tourists, stood an older man in tattered layers, shuffling cautiously past luxury storefronts and designer displays. His name was Samuel, though no one ever stopped to ask it. He kept his eyes low, seeking warmth in the pockets of his frayed coat and taking brief comfort in the glimmers of sunlight that touched his face as he walked. As Samuel bent down to retrieve a crumpled can, a flash of polished black leather caught his eye. Just beside the base of a marble fountain sat a sleek wallet, thick with contents. Carefully, he picked it up, feeling the quality of the leather beneath his fingers, the kind of item that hadn't seen his hands in many years. He hesitated for a moment, allowing himself a peek inside. His heart skipped when he noticed the cash neatly folded inside. Hundreds, no, possibly thousands of dollars in crisp bills, a few credit cards, and a driver's license tucked behind a plastic shield. Samuel squinted at the face on the ID. An older man in his 50s with sharp features and a confident smile. The name read Martin P. Winslow, a name that sounded faintly familiar, even to him. Samuel glanced around, hoping to spot the man in the crowd. But all he saw were strangers, people who brushed past without a second glance. The idea of pocketing even a small amount of the cash floated through his mind, a tempting notion given the ache of hunger gnawing at his stomach. But as he stood there, something in him, something that had always made him different from the others living on the street, stopped him. With a steadying breath, he set off toward the nearest police station, determined to return the wallet intact. The police station wasn't far, but as he walked, Samuel's thoughts wandered to his past life. He hadn't always lived on the streets. There had been a time when he had a home, a family, even a steady job. But life had unraveled slowly and painfully. A downward spiral of bad luck and circumstances beyond his control. Somehow, though, he'd managed to hold on to his sense of right and wrong. It was all he had left, and he wasn't willing to let it go. He arrived at the station and approached the officer at the front desk, holding out the wallet. "I found this a few blocks back," he said quietly. "It looks important. The man's name is Martin Winslow." The officer raised an eyebrow, taking the wallet and examining its contents. "Winslow, huh?" As in the Winslow, he looked back at Samuel with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Do you know who this man is?" Samuel shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just someone who lost his wallet." "Well," the officer said, studying him a little longer, "you've done a good thing. I'll make sure Mr. Winslow gets this back. You don't want to leave your name or anything." Samuel shook his head, already edging toward the door. "No, sir. I just wanted to return it." He knew that he'd done the right thing, and that was all he needed. Outside, the cool air filled his lungs as he walked back toward his usual spot near the park, his stomach still rumbling but his heart a little lighter. He'd done the right thing. He'd held onto a piece of his dignity, even when no one else would have known. But as Samuel disappeared into the background of the city, Martin Winslow was about to make a discovery that would change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Later that evening, Martin sat in his office, pacing in frustration. He'd searched everywhere for his wallet and was certain it was lost for good. The thought of canceling all his cards and recovering his IDs was enough to make him groan. Then, his phone rang. "Mr. Winslow," came a voice on the other end of the line. "This is Officer Grant from the local precinct. I believe we have something of yours, a wallet that was turned in earlier today." Martin's eyes widened. "My wallet? Who brought it in?" A man named. The officer hesitated, checking the file. "Well, he didn't leave a name. Looked like a man who might be down on his luck, if you know what I mean. But he didn't take a thing." Martin was silent, momentarily stunned. He didn't take anything. He'd grown accustomed to expecting the worst, especially in a city as big as this. People took advantage of others all the time. Yet here was someone who had nothing and had chosen honesty over a potential windfall. "Yes, sir," the officer replied, his tone tinged with admiration. Didn't want recognition either, just turned it in and left. Hanging up, Martin felt a sense of wonder settle over him. A man with nothing, yet still holding on to his principles. The words lingered, sparking a strange sense of respect. He glanced at the clock, noting how late it was, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to meet this man. A quiet resolve settled in him. The next morning, Martin asked his assistant to dig up security footage from the area near the fountain and from the police station's entrance. After a few hours of searching, they finally spotted him, a tall, gaunt figure in layers of mismatched clothing, standing hesitantly at the station's door before slipping inside to return the wallet. Martin found himself captivated by the man's image, the quiet dignity in his stance. The grainy footage only made him more curious. He decided he would find Samuel, even if it took days. It turned out to be surprisingly easy. A few questions to local food vendors near the fountain, and he soon had a lead. "You must mean Sam," said one of the vendors, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Sweet guy, down on his luck. You'll usually find him over by the park benches, or sometimes the old library steps. Good luck to you." Martin thanked her and set off toward the park. Sure enough, he soon spotted Samuel, sitting on a bench with a paper cup of coffee, staring off into the trees as if the world around him had quieted for a moment. Martin approached, taking a seat beside him, waiting until Samuel noticed him. "Do I know you?" Samuel asked, surprised by the stranger's suit and the air of wealth that seemed to surround him. Martin offered a gentle smile, extending his hand. "You don't, but I think I owe you my thanks. I'm Martin Winslow. You found my wallet yesterday." Samuel's eyes widened slightly, though he tried to hide his surprise. "I didn't know it was you," he mumbled, as if embarrassed by the attention. "Well, it was, and I can't tell you how grateful I am." Martin hesitated, taking in the man's worn face, the lines etched by years of hardship. "May I buy you breakfast? It's the least I can do." Samuel looked down, wrestling with the offer. "You don't have to do anything. I was just doing the right thing." Martin chuckled, surprised by the man's humility. "And that's why I insist. Please join me." After a moment's pause, Samuel nodded, and they walked together to a small diner nearby. Martin felt a strange, unexplainable warmth in Samuel's quiet presence, a groundedness that was rare in his fast-paced world. Over breakfast, they spoke of everything and nothing about the city, the changing seasons, the weather. Martin was struck by Samuel's intelligence and warmth, hidden beneath layers of worn clothing and a thick veil of quiet sorrow. Finally, Martin asked, "Samuel, may I ask, what happened? You don't seem like someone who's always been down on his luck." Samuel hesitated, sipping his coffee. "It's a long story. Life just unraveled. Lost my job, then my family. Hard to get back up after a fall like that. But you learn to live with it." His voice softened, as if he was ashamed. Martin felt an ache in his chest, the kind of compassion he hadn't felt in years. "Samuel, you don't deserve to be here. Your honesty yesterday shows more integrity than most people I know." He paused, his mind racing with an idea, a strange impulse that he couldn't shake. "Would you let me help you? Not a handout, but a genuine opportunity to get back on your feet." Samuel studied him, unsure of what to make of the offer. "I don't take charity." Martin smiled, sensing the man's pride. "It's not charity. Think of it as an investment in a man who's clearly worth it." Their breakfast ended with the promise of a fresh start. A handshake between two men who couldn't be more different, yet who shared an inexplicable bond. Neither could have predicted where it would lead, but as they left the diner together, a silent understanding passed between them. A sense that this meeting was the beginning of something they both desperately needed. The next few days set in motion a series of events Samuel could hardly believe. Martin began by arranging for him to stay at a small but comfortable motel nearby, ensuring he had clean clothes, warm meals, and a safe place to rest each night. Samuel felt a deep reluctance at first, as if taking these gifts might somehow compromise his dignity. Yet Martin's consistent kindness, the way he treated Samuel not as a project or a burden, but as a friend, softened his resistance. The days turned into weeks, with Martin checking in frequently, occasionally joining Samuel for lunch or a stroll. They would meet in quiet cafes or walk through the park, sharing stories and memories. Martin often listened more than he spoke, finding himself drawn into Samuel's tales of a life once filled with laughter and love. Samuel recounted memories of his late wife, Ruth, and his daughter, Emily, who had moved far away years ago after life took a difficult turn for them both. He explained how the economic downturn and a streak of unfortunate decisions had cost him his job, and how, slowly but surely, everything else had followed. Ruth's illness had been the final blow, and he never truly recovered after she passed. One autumn afternoon, as they walked along the park's winding trails, Martin turned to Samuel, his face thoughtful. "Samuel, would you be open to something a little unconventional? I've been thinking of a way to help you, not just now but for your future. I'd like to set up a small fund, a resource that could help you get back on your feet permanently. We'd set it up together. What do you think?" Samuel stopped walking, his eyes clouded with both surprise and uncertainty. "You don't need to do all that, Martin. I appreciate everything you've done so far more than you know, but I don't want you to put yourself out for me." "It's not just for you," Samuel Martin replied, his tone serious but gentle. "It's for me too. You've given me something I haven't felt in years, a real sense of purpose. There's something about you. I feel like I've gained a true friend, someone who understands the world differently." The weight of those words hung in the air, and Samuel felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and humility. "If you're sure. If you're really sure, Martin, I'd be honored." With that quiet agreement, the wheels of change turned once again. Martin quickly set up a modest fund under Samuel's name, enough to give him a stable base but structured in a way that encouraged Samuel to manage it carefully. He also arranged for Samuel to take on a position at a local community center, where he'd help maintain the grounds and assist with events. It was work Samuel enjoyed, simple but fulfilling, surrounded by people who treated him with respect. He began to find a sense of purpose in his days, something he hadn't felt in years. As the months rolled by, their friendship deepened, each man bringing something to the other that money could never buy. For Martin, who had spent his life scaling the heights of wealth and success, Samuel was a reminder of a simpler, more meaningful way of life. They shared quiet conversations about life's challenges, the small joys of the everyday, and the weight of past mistakes. Martin was no stranger to hardship himself. He'd lost family members too, and a divorce years back had left him feeling detached from the people around him. Samuel's presence, his quiet resilience, offered a healing balm for Martin's own hidden wounds. But as winter settled in, bringing with it a sharp chill and a flurry of holiday festivities, Samuel found himself growing restless. Memories of his family, of happier Christmases, began to resurface, casting a bittersweet shadow over his newfound life. One evening, as they sat in Martin's cozy study, warmed by the fire, Samuel let out a sigh he'd been holding back. "Martin, I'm grateful for all this. Truly. But there's something that's been weighing on me." His voice trailed off, his gaze fixed on the crackling flames. Martin set down his glass of wine and leaned forward, sensing Samuel's unease. "What's on your mind, my friend?" Samuel took a deep breath, his voice low. "I've thought a lot about Emily, my daughter. I haven't spoken to her in years. Last I heard, she moved west and got married. She might have children by now, for all I know." Martin listened, understanding more than he let on. "Do you want to find her? To reach out?" "I do," Samuel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what if she doesn't want to hear from me? What if she blames me for everything that happened?" Martin nodded, his expression empathetic. "You'll never know unless you try, Samuel. Sometimes people just need to know that we're still here, still thinking of them. I could help you find her, if you'd like." The thought filled Samuel with equal parts hope and fear. Yet, in his heart, he knew Martin was right. The next day, Martin contacted a private investigator, a professional who quickly located Emily in a small town in Colorado. They learned that she was indeed married with 2 young children. Samuel was overwhelmed by the news, barely able to process that he might still have a family out there, people who hadn't completely forgotten him. With Martin's encouragement, Samuel wrote a letter to Emily, the words tumbling out with years of unspoken love and regret. He told her about his life, the mistakes he'd made, and how deeply he missed her. He waited anxiously for a reply, uncertain of what to expect. Weeks passed, and with each day that went by, Samuel's heart ached a little more. Finally, a letter arrived, a thick envelope addressed in delicate handwriting that made Samuel's heart pound. With trembling hands, he opened it to find not just a letter but a handful of photos, pictures of Emily, her husband, and 2 young children with wide, warm smiles. The letter was filled with words of forgiveness and love, an open invitation to reunite with the family he thought he'd lost forever. Samuel's eyes brimmed with tears, his fingers tracing the edges of the photographs, as if he could touch the life he had almost given up on. For the first time in many years, he felt the ache of loss give way to something softer, hope. In the following weeks, Martin encouraged Samuel to visit Emily, arranging for a simple plane ticket and accompanying him to the airport. Samuel was nervous, clutching the small duffel bag he'd packed with everything he now owned. But Martin's reassuring presence steadied him, and as they said their goodbyes at the gate, Martin gave Samuel's shoulder a firm, comforting squeeze. Take as much time as you need, Samuel. You have people here who care about you too. We'll be waiting. The reunion with his daughter was everything Samuel had hoped for. They embraced at the airport, tears flowing freely as Emily introduced her children to the grandfather they'd only heard about in stories. Over the next few days, Samuel slowly allowed himself to feel the love and acceptance he'd convinced himself he no longer deserved. He spent his days playing with his grandchildren, helping around the house, and catching up with Emily on the years they'd lost. Every moment was a gift, a chance to rewrite the ending of a story he thought had ended in heartache. When he returned to Chicago, Martin was there to greet him, a broad smile on his face. How was it? Samuel's eyes shone with joy. Better than I ever dreamed. I have a family again, Martin. I never thought I'd get that back. Their friendship deepened as the years went on. Samuel continued to work at the community center, finding purpose in small acts of kindness and connection. Meanwhile, Martin found himself transformed by Samuel's influence. He began to reevaluate his own life, reconnecting with estranged family members and spending more time in service to others. One spring evening, as they sat in Martin's garden watching the sunset, Samuel turned to him with a grateful smile. You changed my life, Martin. I can never repay you for that. Martin shook his head, his voice filled with sincerity. You've already repaid me, Samuel. You taught me what matters. I was successful, yes, but I had forgotten how to really live. Your honesty, your integrity, it reminded me of who I wanted to be. Samuel chuckled softly. We both got a little lost, didn't we? Maybe, Martin agreed, but sometimes, the people we least expect help us find our way back. And so, the two men continued to walk life's path side by side, each finding new strength in their friendship. Samuel's kindness had sparked a change in Martin's life that would echo through both of their futures. Through the unlikely bond between a once homeless man and a wealthy businessman, both had found something far more valuable than money or success: the gift of friendship and the knowledge that, no matter how broken life may seem, it's never too late to begin anew.